With so many exotics to choose from, there's always fresh builds to make, with some that are whack and some that are wild. So today, let's talk about Dawn Chorus. Solar as a subclass really resonates with me. From its great effects like Restoration and Radiant to its weapon perks like Heal Clip and Incandescent, Solar overall feels very well-rounded and fun to use. It also opens up a lot in the way of build crafting, with fantastic aspects and fragments that can be tailored to one of Solar's specific strengths or broadly into all of them. To me, that level of personalization is a really important part of subclasses in Destiny as a whole, and is often the deciding factor on how I feel about certain builds. As a player, I know that I'm far more drawn to builds that feel creative or unique, as opposed to ones that are just strictly powerful. This preference stems from fun being the main motivator for me to play Destiny, and it might be why you may feel differently. As I talk about a lot in these videos, everyone that approaches Destiny will have their own kind of preferences and their own motivating factors defining how they play, what they play, and why they play. There's no right or wrong way to do it, and every single one of those decisions you make as you engage with the game will teach you what you like and what you don't like. Now, I say all of this because while I love Solar, for me, Dawn Chorus checks none of the boxes that I'm interested in. It's an exotic that, similar to Prometheum Spurs, offers nothing fun to build around, with benefits that can be easily replicated or just outperformed. It feels rather unnecessary and inconsequential in the end, which doesn't make Dawn Chorus bad or unusable, but it just doesn't offer up anything fun enough to justify those downsides. So the way Dawn Chorus works, if you're unfamiliar, is threefold. It increases the damage of all Scorch, grants melee energy when you deal damage with that Scorch, and it improves the Daybreak super. I think overall this is a fine perk, and I can see the vision for it, but when I break down the individual parts, it just doesn't feel very impactful to me. So let's start with the least impactful part, which is the super damage increase and its ability to Scorch. While this perk does make Daybreak feel substantially better to use, it doesn't exactly change how you use it or how much fun it is to use. A super is a super to me, and at their base they're fun, and a super doing extra damage isn't really all that appealing for an exotic unless it's for some sort of raid level rotation like Nighthawk. So with that in mind, I think this part of the perk is sort of a non-factor, but overall it's fine. So next is the melee regen, which is where my main frustration comes in. When I looked at Dawn Chorus, this is what I thought would be the part of its kit that would bring the fun and would be the thing that I got creative around. Unfortunately, while the regen is pretty good, I just overall don't think melee ability spam on Solar is that much to write home about, and Dawn's regeneration can already be outpaced through the subclass. Heat Rises provides a massive amount of melee regen, so if you really want to be doing melee ability spam, you'll probably just be using that, and Ember of Searing also outpaces Dawn's regeneration, which you can take advantage of on any Solar build. As a result of high melee regen being available outside of Dawn, dedicating my exotic to it feels like overkill, especially when it's contributing the smallest amount of the energy. Now, finally is the Scorch damage increase, which I think is sort of an interesting case. The increase itself is massive, being around a 200% increase to all Scorch damage, which sounds like it would be a huge difference, but it just often doesn't feel like it, especially in higher difficulties. When you look at a 200% increase for such a small base number, it just kind of doesn't tip the scales. I tested things out on Ultimate in the shooting range, and the red bar acolytes had approximately 200 health. As an example, I killed an enemy with an incandescent weapon next to a target and compared the damage of the two Scorches. At base, it dealt 36 damage total, and with Dawn Chorus, it dealt 95 damage total for 18% and 47.5% of the acolyte's total health, respectively. Now, not only is this, in my opinion, a pretty small increase, but it's also just about as exciting to use as that math just was. While I'm sure in certain hyper-specific scenarios, squeezing out that extra damage could be make or break, for the average piece of content, it's just not going to be. There's already so many great ways to spread and maintain Scorch damage, and with the crowd clearing potential of Solar through ignitions, relying on Scorch to chip away at enemies just doesn't feel like much use. My next thought then would be, well, maybe it makes a big difference on boss damage, but I just don't think that's the case, and it can easily be outpaced. Hellion is the best way to keep Scorch on a single target during a damage phase, as it's autonomous, but in that case, Eunoia is the far superior option. Again on Ultimate, at base, the Hellion dealt 2,609 damage, with Dawn it dealt 3,071 damage for a 17% increase, and Eunoia dealt 4,164 damage for a 35% increase over Dawn Chorus. So not only does Eunoia deal higher damage against single targets, I think it also provides a much better neutral game than Dawn does. With the speed that Yunoya can spread Scorch and how fast it can cause ignitions, I think it far outpaces what Dawn's Scorch damage can provide, even if you include Dawn's melee spam. As I mentioned earlier, you could still take advantage of using maxed out melee spams with Yunoya by using Heat Rises and Ember of Searing, which just beats out Dawn Chorus in every avenue. Now, I normally don't like to compare exotics, as I try to approach each one on its own terms, and I don't think it's the most productive thing to say, well, this exotic is better, so you should use that instead. Each exotic to me offers something unique, and experimenting with that thing is the cool part to me, not its comparative performance. However, I also think it's not exactly possible to truly review what an exotic does without understanding what else is possible. I mention Yunoya here specifically because it's also a lot more fun to use than Dawn is, and it makes a very tangible impact on your moment-to-moment gameplay. I just can't say that that's the case for Dawn, since everything it does feels like it kind of flies under the radar, and while you can dig deep and crunch numbers to see the impact, you just don't feel any of it while you're actually playing. I think it's a pretty bad sign in general that I had to go into the shooting range and spend 5 to 10 minutes testing Dawn just to tell what was even going on. The perk should be immediately felt and immediately noticeable the first time you give it a spin. Not only do I think the descriptions should be accurate, which is often a problem, but again, the second you try it, it should click. Continuing to use Yunoya as an example, the second you spawn that first Hellion, it's immediately clear exactly what Yunoya does. The projectile spreads into 4 pieces, tracks the targets, and it quadruples the spread or damage of the Scorch. You'll also be able to see that the Scorch from each of the pieces is stacking as ignitions begin happening noticeably faster, which again not only makes the exotic click for you, but it provides that tangible feedback on what the exotic is doing. I genuinely could not tell if Dawn was making any impact during my time with it. While the Super felt better to me than the base version, I would still probably prefer to use Song of Flame, and in terms of the neutral game, I never felt Dawn's effect. I had a pretty hard time putting this video together, as I'm not quite sure what to recommend to you when using Dawn, since I just don't think it adds anything. If you're super tuned in and for some reason Dawn is exactly what you're looking for, you probably already know about it, and if you don't, it's likely not going to do anything for you. It'll function essentially just as well on any solar build you throw at it, since most of the kit applies Scorch, and if you want to play into the melee regen through Heat Rises or Ember of Searing, you'll just immediately outclass the regeneration of Dawn, which makes it kind of pointless. If you really like Daybreak and you want to make a super build around it, Dawn would definitely be a great choice, but otherwise, I just don't think it's got anything going on. I spent a pretty fair amount of time with Dawn and almost always felt as though I didn't even have an exotic equipped. It didn't add anything fun, it didn't noticeably impact any of my gameplay, and it just didn't do anything for me. In the end, Dawn Chorus was pretty disappointing, a bit of a nothing burger, and in my opinion is unfortunately whack. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed the video. There's a dim link down below if you want to give this exact build a try, or if you want to use it as the base for your own spin on it. Subscribe to the channel to keep an eye out for more videos soon, and let me know in the comments what you think of Dawn Chorus.